My name is Whitney Wood, and I was 33 the day a stranger told me I had a daughter. I was standing in the produce aisle at Harris Market, squeezing avocados like the firmness of fruit was the hardest decision I'd faced that week. A woman tapped my shoulder. "Your daughter is beautiful," she said with a smile. I blinked at her. "I don't have a daughter." Her expression changed instantly. "She's been following you since the park." I turned around and saw a little girl I'd never seen before. 5 years old, maybe. Brown hair tucked neatly behind her ears. Eyes so familiar it made my stomach twist. She reached up and took my hand like she'd practiced the motion her entire life. "Can we go home now, Mommy?" I didn't know her name. I didn't know where she'd come from, but I knew my dead sister's face the second I saw it. And my mother had spent 5 years making sure no one else ever would. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary women face the people who underestimated them and answer with patience instead of chaos. The people who depend on your silence rarely stop to ask whether silence means weakness. Get comfortable, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. The woman's name was Pam. Pam Dwyer, mid-50s, reading glasses hanging from a chain, the kind of person who apologized twice before finishing a sentence. She hurried over to the girl in the cereal aisle, out of breath and already explaining herself. "I'm here for the temporary placement." She slipped away at the park while I was fixing my shoe. Pam crouched beside the girl and gently tried to loosen her grip, but the child's fingers stayed wrapped around mine like a seatbelt. "She does this sometimes," Pam said more quietly now. "Finds someone and won't let go. She lost her mom a couple months ago." I looked down at the little girl. She was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Not fear. Not need. Recognition. Like she'd already decided who I was before I ever spoke. "I'm hungry," the girl said. "Can I have strawberry milk?" She said it the way children repeat something they've asked 1,000 times from someone who always answered yes. I didn't have strawberry milk. I didn't have anything meant for a 5-year-old. But somehow I found myself walking toward the dairy section anyway, Pam following behind us, the girl's hands still wrapped tightly around mine. Pam watched us for a long moment in silence. Then she glanced at the girl's face and then back at mine. "You too could be." She stopped herself and shook her head. "Sorry. That's none of my business." It should have been just another casual remark from a stranger in a grocery store. It wasn't. That careless sentence became the first crack in a wall my family had spent 5 years building. Pam and I sat on a bench outside Harris Market while the girl drank her strawberry milk with both hands, knees pulled against her chest, a purple stuffed elephant tucked under one arm. The elephant was faded and worn soft, the kind of toy that survives 1,000 naps and too many trips through the washing machine. One ear had been stitched back on with thread that didn't even match. "That's Plum," the girl said without looking up. "He goes everywhere." I nodded like this entire situation was perfectly normal. A stranger sitting beside a child she just met discussing the travel history of a stuffed animal. Pam excused herself to make a phone call. The girl placed her milk beside her and held Plum out to me, and I took him because I honestly didn't know what else to do. That's when I felt it. A small fabric tag sewn by hand into the seam along the elephant's belly. I turned it over. Block letters written in permanent marker, the ink slightly faded. Lilywood. Beneath the name was a phone number. 10 digits. My thumb froze on the last name. Wood. I read it again. Lilywood. I have a very particular skill set. I'm a forensic accountant. I spend my days tracing numbers people worked hard to erase. I notice patterns. And I was noticing one now. The brown hair. The shape of her jaw. The way she tilted her head when she listened. And her last name. My last name. "Lily," I said softly. She looked up. "That's your name." She nodded. "What's yours?" "Whitney." She studied me the way children study adults when they're deciding whether you're safe. "You look like my mommy," she said. Then she calmly returned to drinking her milk. I drove back to my office that afternoon and sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the dashboard clock. My office is a small 2-room suite above a sandwich shop on Franklin Street. Wood Forensic Accounting. Established 4 years ago using savings I earned waiting tables through community college and night school. I like numbers. Numbers don't manipulate you. They don't choose favorites. They either reconcile or they don't. I built the business alone, and honestly, I preferred it that way. I ate lunch at my desk. I hadn't invited anyone over for dinner in 8 months. My apartment stayed clean because no one else was there to make a mess. This was the life I designed for myself. Efficient, quiet, accountable to no one. And I was good at it. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number from Plum's tag. 3 rings, then a recording. The number you have reached is no longer in service. Deadline. I tried a reverse lookup instead. The number had once belonged to a Vanessa Wood at an address in Mill Haven, 40 minutes north. Vanessa. My older sister. The sister who stopped returning my calls 4 years ago. The sister my mother insisted had gone away to live her own life and didn't want to be found. The sister whose name always made my mother's mouth tighten at Thanksgiving dinner. I typed the name and address into a search engine. The third result was a funeral home listing. Vanessa Marie Wood. 1989 to 2025. Services held privately. No public memorial. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred together. Then I read it again because forensic accountants don't panic. We reconcile. I found Vanessa's photo on the funeral home's condolence page. She looked thinner than I remembered, her cheekbones sharper, but she still had the same half-smile she used whenever she noticed something funny before anyone else did. 36 years old. Diagnosed 6 months before she died. Aggressive. Fast. The obituary was only 4 sentences long and sounded like it had been written by someone filling out paperwork. Beloved daughter. Cherished sister. Preceded in death by her father, Gerald Wood. No children listed. I scrolled to the bottom and read it again. No children listed. My family, my mother specifically, had always told me Vanessa couldn't have children. That there had once been a pregnancy that ended badly and we weren't supposed to talk about it. I believed her. I believed my mother because that's what I'd been trained to do. Accept the version of events she handed me and stop asking questions. I pulled up Vanessa's photo again and held my phone beside the memory of Lily standing in the grocery store. Same brown hair. Same jawline. Same slight tilt of the head. Lily wasn't just a little girl carrying my last name. She was a carbon copy of my sister at 5 years old. I'd seen those exact features in photo albums my mother kept on the shelf above the piano. Vanessa at 5 in a sundress, squinting at the camera, one hand gripping a popsicle and the other holding mine. I was 2 years old in that picture, too young to remember it clearly. But after seeing Lily's face that afternoon, I remembered something my body apparently never forgot. I closed my laptop. Then I opened it again. I had work to do. I called Pam the next morning. She'd given me her number at the bench. In case you think of anything. And I could tell she'd expected me to use it. Pam connected me with Lily's caseworker at the county child welfare office, a woman named Deborah Layton, who spoke in the careful, measured tone of someone who had delivered too much bad news for too many years. Deborah confirmed what I'd already started piecing together. Lily was in emergency foster care. Her mother, Vanessa Wood, had died 10 weeks earlier. No father was listed on the birth certificate. The state was in the process of locating and verifying extended family members. I'd like a DNA test, I said. I believe Lily may be my niece. There was a pause. Then Deborah asked a question I wasn't prepared for. Ms. Wood, are you aware that we already notified the next of kin 7 weeks ago? I sat completely still. Who did you notify? The maternal grandmother, Lorraine Wood. She confirmed the family relationship. She said she'd coordinate with the other relatives. 7 weeks. My mother had known about Lily for 7 weeks. She'd confirmed the relationship. She'd told the state she would handle everything, and she hadn't mentioned a single word to me. Not at Sunday brunch 3 weeks ago. Not during the phone call last Tuesday when she asked me to review her tax return. Not once. Ms. Wood, are you still there? I'm here, I answered. I'd like that DNA test, and I'd also like to understand why nobody coordinated with me. The results came back 4 days later. Some people say they already knew before the paperwork confirmed it. I'll be honest. I didn't know. I hoped. But hope and certainty are 2 different things, and I don't trust anything without documentation. The report said what numbers say when they stop lying. And a niece. Probability of biological relationship greater than 99%. Lily was Vanessa's daughter. My sister had a daughter. Vanessa had raised a little girl for 5 years, and then she died, and somehow I'd never known any of it. I sat at my desk holding the report and did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not the kind of crying people do during movies or funerals. The quiet, locked-chest kind where you suddenly realize the story you'd been told about your own family had been missing an entire person. A child. My niece. For 5 years, Lily had existed. Eating breakfast. Learning how to tie her shoes. Carrying around a purple elephant named Plum. And somewhere in the middle of all that, my sister had been sick and frightened and alone. I set the report down and carefully lined up the edges with the corner of my desk because that's what I do when I need to think. Then I picked up my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Deborah Layton at Child Welfare requesting supervised visitation while the guardianship process was being sorted out. The second was to my mother. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail. I know about Lily. Nobody told me she existed. That ends today. Then I hung up and opened a new spreadsheet. Column A, what I knew. Column B, what I didn't. Column B was longer. My mother called back the following evening. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask about the DNA results. She opened with a sigh so polished it sounded rehearsed. Whitney, why are you digging this up? I pulled the phone away from my ear for a second, stared at the ceiling, then brought it back. Digging what up? A child. Don't be dramatic. She's 5 years old, Mom. She's real. She's living in a stranger's house. Lorraine's voice flattened the way it always did when she decided the conversation was beneath her. I was notified weeks ago. I've been handling it quietly. There's no reason for you to get involved. Handling it how? Dean and Sloan are looking into the situation. Dean, my younger brother. 29 years old, 2 maxed-out credit cards, and a wife who once Googled, how much is a foster child stipend, at Thanksgiving dinner when she thought no one could see her screen. I knew because I'd been sitting beside her. What exactly does looking into the situation mean? It means your brother has a stable home. 2 parents. A yard. It's better for the child. Her name is Lily. I know her name. Do you? Because 7 weeks ago, you could have told me she existed, and you chose not to. Silence. Not the silence of someone gathering thoughts. The silence of someone deciding how much truth they were willing to allow through. There are reasons I didn't tell you, she finally said. Reasons older than you realize. Then she hung up. I wrote down every word of the conversation on a legal pad. Then I underlined 2 phrases. Handling it quietly. Older than you realize. I didn't sleep much that night, but I reconciled. Deborah Layton brought me a box of Vanessa's personal belongings the following week. Standard procedure, she explained. Items collected from the apartment that weren't included in the estate filing. A few books. A pair of reading glasses. A child's drawing of a house with too many windows. And at the bottom, tucked beneath a folded sweater that still carried a faint lavender scent, there was a cream-colored envelope sealed on the front. Vanessa's handwriting. The same looping cursive I remembered from birthday cards she sent when I was 12. 1 word written across the front. Birdie. I placed the envelope on my desk and didn't touch it for 3 days. Nobody had called me Birdie since I was 9 years old. It was Vanessa's nickname for me. In Bennett the summer I broke my arm falling out of a tree and she said I'd been trying to fly. She was the only person who ever called me that. My mother called me Whitney. My brother usually called me nothing. Vanessa called me Birdie. And then one day she stopped calling me anything at all. I told myself it was because she wanted space. I told myself a lot of things. The envelope sat beside my keyboard between my coffee mug and a stack of quarterly filings. Every morning I looked at it. Every morning I decided I still wasn't ready. I wasn't afraid of what was inside. I was afraid of what it would confirm. That my sister had been reaching for me from a distance I didn't even know existed. And I'd been too conditioned by my mother's version of reality to notice. On the 3rd night, I poured myself a glass of water, sat down at my kitchen table, and picked up the envelope. But before I could open it, my doorbell rang. Dean and Sloan were standing on my porch at 7:45 on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual because Dean hadn't voluntarily visited my apartment in 2 years. Sloane was smiling the way she smiles whenever she wants something. Too wide. Too many teeth. The expression of a woman who practiced her opening line in the car. "Whitney, we need to talk about the little girl," Sloane said, stepping inside before I invited her. Dean followed behind her like a shadow with a mortgage. They sat on my couch. Sloane crossed her legs and immediately launched into her speech. "We've been thinking. Dean and I have a stable home, 2 incomes, a guest room we've already started cleaning out. It just makes sense for us to take her in." "Take Lily in?" I asked. "Right. Lily." Sloane smiled again. Dean said nothing. I waited. Sloane continued talking. School, districts, backyard space, the pediatrician they'd already researched. Then she slipped. "And of course there's the house. Vanessa's house in Millhaven. Someone needs to manage the estate. And if Lily's living with us, it simplifies the—" She stopped herself and quickly recalibrated. "The logistics." I'd spent 15 years reading financial documents where people buried their real intentions beneath 3 layers of reasonable language. I knew exactly what logistics meant. It meant the fully paid-off house in Millhaven. It meant survivor benefits. It meant the modest life insurance policy Vanessa had probably left behind for Lily. "What about Lily?" I asked. "What about what she wants?" Sloane blinked. Dean stared at the carpet. They stayed until Sloane eventually ran out of talking points. During the entire visit, she talked about the house far more than she talked about Lily. I keep thinking about how easily they reduced her to a problem. A line item. If you've ever watched your own family calculate a person's worth based on what she might cost them, then you already understand the cold feeling that settled into me that night. Stay with me. This is the part where I stopped asking permission. After Dean and Sloane left, I sat alone in the silence of my apartment and did the thing that comes most naturally to me. I opened my laptop, logged into the county probate records database, and started building a file. Not a feelings file. A facts file. Column A, Lily's birth certificate. Mother listed as Vanessa Marie Wood. Father left blank. Column B, Vanessa's estate. A house in Millhaven, a modest life insurance policy, survivor benefits through Social Security for a dependent minor. Column C, next of kin notification issued to Lorraine Wood 7 weeks earlier with signed acknowledgement of receipt. Column D, Lorraine's failure to notify me. Column E was blank. I labeled it, "What they don't know I know." Then I left it open. I'm a forensic accountant. When a client hands me a set of books and insists everything is fine, my job is to find the exact page where fine stopped being true. I'd spent my career reading the math hidden behind other people's lies. This was the first time the lies appeared in my own family's ledger. I didn't make accusations. I didn't call Dean and Sloane back. I didn't contact my mother. I poured myself another glass of water and did what I always do. I followed the numbers. Because numbers don't protect anyone's feelings, and they don't know how to hide. The next morning, I called a family law attorney named Grace Emery and told her I wanted to petition for temporary guardianship of my biological niece. Grace was methodical, direct, and billed $400 an hour, which I could afford because I'd been saving money since I was 19 like it was an Olympic event. She filed the petition that same afternoon. 2 days later, she called me back with a voice that had shifted from methodical to cautious. "Whitney, there's something you need to know." I sat down. "What is it?" "There's already a petition on file." My stomach tightened. "From who?" "Dean and Sloane Wood filed 6 days ago. Their attorney submitted a home study request and a character reference from—" She paused. "From your mother." I pressed my thumbnail into the side of my index finger, a habit left over from college exams. "What does their petition say about me?" Grace read directly from the filing. Sloane and Dean described me as an unmarried professional with no childcare experience, limited family involvement, and the phrase that made me shut my eyes completely, a pattern of emotional distance that raises concerns regarding her capacity for sustained caregiving. My mother had signed on to that narrative. The same woman who never told me Lily existed had now informed a court that I was too emotionally distant to raise her. I asked Grace one question. "Is there anything in Vanessa's estate records? A will? Guardianship nomination? Anything naming a preferred guardian?" "I'll check. Check fast." I hung up, placed my phone on the desk, and stared at the cream-colored envelope beside my keyboard. Birdie. I was beginning to understand why my sister had addressed it to a name only she ever used. The first supervised visitation happened on a Thursday in a room filled with fluorescent lights, plastic chairs, and a social worker named Terry, sitting in the corner taking notes on a clipboard. Lily walked in carrying Plum by one ear. She saw me and paused. Then she crossed the room and climbed into the chair beside mine like she was returning to a seat she'd saved. I'd brought strawberry milk. The small cartons with the foil straw. Lily accepted it without speaking, peeled the straw open, and drank quietly. After a minute, she said, "Mommy drank this when her hair was falling out." My throat tightened instantly, but I kept my face calm. "Your mommy liked strawberry milk?" Lily nodded. "She drank it every day when she got sick. She said it tasted like being little again." I didn't answer. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't feel smaller than what Lily had just handed me. A piece of her mother's dying, carried alone by a 5-year-old child. Lily finished the carton and folded it flat the way someone had taught her. Then she lifted Plum from her lap and placed him carefully on mine. "You keep him," she said, "so you won't be scared." Terry glanced up from her clipboard. I held the stuffed elephant with both hands and felt the fabric tag press against my palm. Lily would. And underneath my sister's handwriting was the faded phone number that had led me here. To this room. To this child. To the truth my family had buried beneath 5 years of silence. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Plum and the cream envelope and decided I was done being afraid of both. I opened the letter. Vanessa's handwriting was smaller than I remembered, the lines tighter, like she was trying to compress an entire life into 2 pages. "Birdie, if you're reading this, then the thing I feared finally happened, and I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you while I could still explain it out loud." She wrote that she'd gotten pregnant at 31. The father was someone she'd loved briefly and lost permanently. He left before Lily was born and never looked back. When she told our mother, Lorraine gave her 2 choices. Give the baby up privately or lose the family. She said a child without a father would humiliate us. She said she'd raised us better than this. She said if I kept the pregnancy, I'd be completely on my own. Vanessa kept the baby. She moved to Millhaven. Raised Lily alone. Worked as a bookkeeper for a veterinary clinic and told nobody in the family. Meanwhile, our mother informed everyone that Vanessa had suffered a miscarriage and moved away to recover. I should have called you Birdie. I thought about it every year on your birthday. But Mom told me you agreed with her. She said you thought I was selfish. I believed her because it was easier than discovering whether it was true. I set the letter down and pressed both hands flat against the kitchen table. My mother had told Vanessa that I agreed with her. My mother had told me Vanessa wanted no contact. 2 lies. 1 wall built from both sides. The letter ended with a sentence I carried with me into every room for the next 4 months. I signed papers, Birdie. If something happens to me, find the papers. I named you. I always trusted you. Can we go home now, Mommy? Vanessa wrote that Lily used to ask that question every night before bed. She wrote it down like a prayer she no longer knew how to answer. I called Grace Emery at 7 the next morning. The papers Vanessa mentioned. They exist. I need you to find them. Grace found them within 48 hours. Not at the county probate office, but inside a box of Vanessa's personal documents the Millhaven apartment manager had stored after the lease ended. A notarized designation of standby guardian naming me, Whitney Wood, as Lily's intended legal guardian in the event of Vanessa's death or incapacitation. The document was signed, witnessed, and notarized at a UPS store in Millhaven by a public notary named David Trent, who confirmed both the date and Vanessa's identity when Grace's office contacted him. Vanessa had prepared the document but never officially filed it with the court. Maybe she ran out of time. Maybe she believed the letter would be enough. Either way, the designation became legally valid the moment Grace submitted it that afternoon. But it was the second page that mattered most. Under the section titled Exclusions and Reasons, Vanessa had written a single paragraph. She excluded Lorraine Wood from guardianship consideration. The stated reason: my mother pressured me to relinquish my daughter at birth and has refused to acknowledge my child's existence for 5 years. I do not believe she would act in Lily's best interest. She excluded Dean and Sloan Wood from consideration. The stated reason: My brother and his wife expressed no interest in either my well-being or my daughter's well-being during my illness and have no existing relationship with my child. Then she named me. The stated reason was only one sentence. Whitney is the only member of my family who never stopped being kind, even when she didn't know the full story. Grace read the document aloud to me over the phone. When she finished, I asked her to repeat that last sentence. She did. "This changes the entire case," Grace said. "The court places significant weight on a parent's documented wishes. Combined with the DNA results and your financial stability, Whitney, this is strong." I thanked her, ended the call, and sat in my car until the parking meter expired. Then I went back inside and updated column E. Column E had been supposed to stay empty until I found something concrete. It didn't stay empty for long. The forensic accountant in me had already begun pulling threads. Not because I wanted to uncover something ugly, but because ugly things usually reveal themselves if you stare at the numbers long enough. Vanessa's estate was modest. A paid-off house in Mill Haven worth approximately $220,000. A life insurance policy through her employer worth $75,000 payable to Lily's guardian. And Social Security survivor benefits for a dependent child, roughly $1,600 per month until Lily turned 18. None of it was enormous money. But to someone carrying $40,000 in credit card debt, it looked a lot like a lifeline with a child attached. I requested the estate account activity from probate court. What I found was a Form SSA-11, a request for representative payee status submitted to the Social Security Administration 4 weeks earlier. An application to redirect Lily's survivor benefits to a designated payee. The form had been filed before Lily had a legal guardian. Before anyone had custody. Before anyone should have been touching that money. The applicant's signature appeared at the bottom, but the copy I received had the name field redacted pending probate court review. Grace said she'd subpoena the unredacted version. I didn't need it yet. I already had a short list of people who knew about Lily's benefits, had motive to access them, and had filed a competing guardianship petition. The list contained exactly 2 names. I placed the form into a manila folder, labeled it with a date and case reference number, and filed it into the bottom drawer of my desk. Column E now had its first entry. Follow the money. My mother called 3 days later and informed me she was hosting a family discussion regarding Lily's future at her house on Saturday. She used the word discussion the same way diplomats use it before wars. I arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. Lorraine's living room hadn't changed since I was 15 years old. The same cream-colored carpet. The same shelf of photo albums above the piano. The same atmosphere of controlled perfection that made you want to whisper, even when nobody was asleep. Dean and Sloane sat together on the love seat. Sloane had brought a binder. Tabbed. Color-coded. Labeled Lily's transition plan. My mother sat in the wingback chair beside the window. Deborah Layton, the caseworker, had been invited by Lorraine under the excuse of keeping everyone informed. 2 cousins I barely spoke to hovered awkwardly near the kitchen doorway. Lorraine opened the meeting by announcing this was a family matter that should be resolved privately. Then she turned toward me. "Whitney, I understand you filed a petition. I think we can all agree Dean and Sloane are better positioned. They have a home. They have each other." She paused deliberately, letting the phrase "each other" settle over the room like a verdict against my singleness. "You've never raised anything except spreadsheets," she added. Someone in the kitchen coughed. Sloane nodded. Dean stared down at his shoes. Deborah quietly wrote something onto her notepad. I looked at my mother. At the woman who told my sister I thought she was selfish. Who told me my sister wanted no contact. Who knew about Lily for 7 weeks and chose silence every single day. And I said nothing. Not because I lacked words. Because I learned a long time ago that the first person to speak in a room full of liars is usually the first person to lose control of the room. So I let Lorraine continue talking. I had documents. Documents don't need interruptions. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. Lorraine spoke for 30 of them. Sloane presented her binder. Dean mentioned the school district twice. Then Deborah Layton asked the only question that actually mattered. She looked around the room at my mother, Dean, and Sloane and said, I need to understand something. Lily's mother passed away 10 weeks ago. The state notified Mrs. Wood 7 weeks ago. Why did it take 7 weeks for any family member to initiate contact with the child? The room went quiet. Not the kind of quiet where people are thinking. The kind where people are silently deciding who should speak first. Nobody did. So Deborah continued. Additionally, the court will want to know why Ms. Whitney Wood, the aunt and the individual named in the mother's guardianship designation, was not informed by any family member during that period. Lorraine's jaw tightened. She glanced at Dean. Dean studied his shoes again. And then Lorraine said it. She said it the way someone says a sentence they've believed for 5 years but never expected to defend out loud. That child was never supposed to exist. The room didn't gasp. That's something that happens in movies. In real life, when someone says the worst possible sentence at exactly the worst possible moment, the room simply freezes. Deborah's pen stopped moving. Sloane's mouth opened, then closed. And I heard a sound from the hallway. A small sound. A shoe against hardwood. I turned around. Lily stood in the doorway. Pam had brought her 20 minutes early for a scheduled handoff. The meeting should have already been over, but Lorraine had dragged it out, and Pam had entered through the side door the way she always did during pickups. Nobody had checked. Nobody even thought to. Lily's arms hung at her sides. Plum lay on the floor where she'd dropped him. I crossed the room in 4 steps, knelt in front of her, and lifted her into my arms. I didn't say a single word to anyone. I carried Lily straight out the front door. People assume the quiet one won't fight. They're right about the quiet. They're wrong about the fight. If anyone ever convinced you that calm people are easy to break, keep watching. The next room I walked into changed everything. I sat in my car with Lily in the back seat, buckled into the booster seat I'd bought the day after our first visitation. She held Plum against her chest and stared silently out the window. I didn't rush to fill the silence with reassurances she hadn't asked for. I just drove. When we reached my apartment, she sat at the kitchen table while I poured her a carton of strawberry milk, the kind with the foil straw. She drank half of it before speaking. That lady said I wasn't supposed to be here. I slowly set my glass down. I heard her. Is that true? I pulled a chair beside hers and sat down. No, I said gently. That isn't true at all. You are exactly supposed to be here. She thought about it for a moment the way children think about things, completely and honestly, without negotiation. Okay, she said. Then she finished her milk. That night, after Pam returned to take Lily back to the foster placement, I sat at my desk and looked at everything spread out before me. Vanessa's letter. The guardianship designation Grace found. The estate filings. The representative payee form. The legal pad where I'd written down every word my mother had said. Everything was there. The case was clean. The numbers were solid. The only thing missing was the decision to stop building the file and finally use it. I closed my laptop. Then I opened it again and drafted a 14-page brief for the guardianship hearing. Grace later told me, "You wrote like a woman who's been waiting her entire career for the right audit." Grace submitted Vanessa's guardianship designation to probate court on a Monday. By Wednesday, Dean's attorney called requesting a copy. By Thursday, Sloane called me directly. "Whitney, let's try to be reasonable about this." I let the word reasonable sit in the air for a second. "I'm listening. Nobody's saying you don't care about Lily, but a notarized form from... I mean, Vanessa was sick when she signed that. People make emotional decisions when they're dying." "Vanessa was a bookkeeper," I replied. "She made organized decisions. That's how bookkeepers work. But naming you? You're single. You work constantly. You don't have. What I have is a signed and notarized legal document in which a dying mother named her sister as her daughter's guardian. What I also have is a document where that same mother specifically excluded your household and explained exactly why." Silence. I could hear Dean whispering something in the background, but I couldn't make out the words. "Sloane, I'm only going to say this once. She named me, not you. That's not my opinion. It's notarized." Sloane hung up. Grace called an hour later to inform me the probate court had officially accepted Vanessa's designation into evidence and scheduled a formal guardianship hearing 6 weeks later. The hearing would be open, meaning the judge, caseworker, attorneys, and interested family members could attend. It would be the first time every document I'd collected would exist together in the same room. I marked the date on my calendar. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, removed the manila folder containing the representative payee form, and placed it on top of the stack. Whoever signed that form was about to have a very uncomfortable afternoon. Grace obtained the unredacted version of the representative payee form 3 weeks before the hearing. She called me on a Friday and read the signature line aloud. Sloan Wood. Co-signed by Dean Wood. Filed 4 weeks after Vanessa's death. Before any custody determination. Before any court appointed a legal guardian. Before anyone had lawful authority over a single cent of Lily's money. The form requested that Lily's Social Security survivor benefits, $1,600 per month, be redirected into a joint bank account belonging to Dean and Sloan. The stated purpose was interim care expenses for the minor child. Except Dean and Sloan didn't have the minor child. Lily was living in foster care with Pam. Dean and Sloan hadn't fed her a meal, attended a doctor's appointment, or bought her a single pair of shoes. There were no interim care expenses because there was no interim care. I printed the form. Then I printed the bank statements Grace subpoenaed, showing 2 deposits matching the benefit amount before the Social Security Administration suspended the payment arrangement pending review. I printed the timeline. Vanessa's death. The next of kin notification. Sloan's benefits application. Dean's competing guardianship petition. I laid every document across my desk in chronological order. The pattern was clean. I've audited companies that worked harder to hide fraud than Dean and Sloan did. They hadn't even bothered opening a separate account. I placed everything back into the manila folder and attached a new label. Exhibit D. Grace warned me to be careful because family court cases become emotional and judges dislike theatrics. I told her, I don't do theatrics. I do exhibits. 2 weeks before the hearing, Dean and Sloan's attorney filed a motion accusing me of exerting undue influence over Lily during supervised visitations and exploiting a traumatized child's attachment disorder for personal gain. The motion requested my visitation rights be suspended pending psychological evaluation. I read the filing at my desk at 9 in the morning beside a cup of coffee that turned cold before I finished page 2. Personal gain. That phrase stayed with me. Not because it hurt. I've read worse language inside depositions. But because I knew exactly where it came from. The wording was too calculated for Dean. The framing was too strategic for Sloan. This carried my mother's fingerprints all over it. Lorraine hadn't personally filed anything. She hadn't signed a single document since the next of kin acknowledgement. But she'd been in the room with Dean's attorney. Grace confirmed it through a filing listing Lorraine as a consulting family member. Consulting. My mother was consulting on strategies to keep me away from my dead sister's child. The motion was denied within a week. The judge noted Lily's caseworker had submitted positive reports from every supervised visitation and that no clinical basis existed for the accusations. But the motion accomplished exactly what it intended. It warned me this would not be a clean hearing. They were going to come after me. They would question my fitness. They would use my solitude, my work, and my silence as proof that something inside me was lacking. They were counting on me to react, to raise my voice, to hand them something messy they could point at and say, "See? She's unstable." I didn't react. I updated the file. The night before the hearing, my mother came to my apartment. She didn't call ahead. She knocked twice and stood in the doorway wearing her good coat. The charcoal one she saves for church services and situations she considers serious. I let her in because you don't leave your 61-year-old mother standing outside on a porch in October, even when she's the reason you haven't slept in 3 days. She sat at my kitchen table. I poured her a glass of water. She never touched it. I was 19 when I had Vanessa, she said. No preamble. No warm-up. Just the sentence, flat and direct as a tax return. Your father and I weren't married yet. His family refused to speak to me for 2 years. My own mother told me I'd ruined the family name. She slowly turned the glass between her hands. I promised myself I would build something respectable. And I did. 40 years, Whitney. 40 years of being the woman who got it right. Then her voice tightened. And then Vanessa. She stopped speaking for a moment and pressed her lips together. Vanessa made the same mistake I did, and I couldn't bear watching it happen again. I looked at my mother and, for the first time, I didn't see the woman who erased my niece. I saw the 19-year-old girl who had once been erased herself, and who decided the only way to survive was to make sure it never showed again. For a brief second, I understood her. Then the second passed. "Mom," I said quietly, "she didn't make a mistake. She had a daughter. And you told her to throw that daughter away to protect your reputation." Lorraine's expression hardened. "I was protecting this family. You were protecting yourself. And now a 5-year-old believes she was never supposed to exist." She stood, adjusted her coat, and walked out without touching the water. That child was never supposed to exist. That sentence followed me into court the next morning like a bruise that refused to fade. I woke at 5, showered, and dressed in the navy blazer I reserve for client depositions. Professional. Plain. The kind of clothing that says I'm not here to perform. On my dining table, I laid everything out one final time. Exhibit A, Lily's birth certificate. Mother, Vanessa Marie Wood. Father, not listed. Exhibit B, DNA confirmation. Aunt-niece relationship, 99% probability. Exhibit C, Vanessa's notarized standby guardianship naming me, with written exclusions and reasons. Exhibit D, representative pay form signed by Sloan, co-signed by Dean, filed without legal authority, redirecting benefits into their joint account. Exhibit E, state next of kin notification to Lorraine Wood, signed 7 weeks before any family contact with me. Exhibit F, Deborah Layton's visitation reports. All positive. 6 exhibits. 47 pages. Every claim sourced. Every date verified. Every number reconciled. Grace had reviewed it twice and said it was the cleanest guardianship filing she had seen in 11 years. I didn't feel clean. I felt like someone about to dismantle her own family with documentation. But then I remembered Lily standing in that doorway, small, silent, plumb on the floor, hearing her grandmother say she was never supposed to exist. I picked up the folder, placed it in my bag, and drove to the courthouse. I don't raise my voice. I raise exhibits. The probate courtroom was on the 3rd floor, wood floors, tall windows, a judge's bench that looked like it had outlasted generations of arguments. I sat, placed my bag beside me, and waited. Dean and Sloan arrived with their attorney, Craig Phelps, a man who spoke in structured paragraphs and wore a tie clip like it was part of his argument. Lorraine sat behind them in the gallery. Not a party. A presence. A consultant. The courtroom wasn't full, but it wasn't empty either. Deborah Layton sat near the front with her case file. 2 cousins I barely spoke to hovered in the back. A court reporter typed steadily. A bailiff stood near the door. Judge Catherine Owens observed everything with the calm of someone who had learned to recognize performance at a distance. Craig Phelps opened first. He built Dean and Sloan into the ideal placement. 2-parent household, stability, community ties, financial readiness, and a clear willingness to raise a child in crisis. Then he turned to me. "A well-meaning but unsuitable candidate," he said. "No family structure. No childcare experience. No emotional availability." He paused deliberately on those last words, letting them land. "Ms. Wood has lived alone her entire adult life," he continued. "She has never been responsible for another person's well-being. The child needs a family, Your Honor, not a filing cabinet." Sloan nodded. Dean remained still. Lorraine watched from the gallery with the same expression she wore in church when a sermon confirmed something she already believed. I sat beside Grace with my hands folded and my bag at my feet. I didn't react. I didn't take notes. I didn't move. I had spent years in rooms where people lied professionally. I knew the correct response to a false narrative was a true record. Grace stood and submitted our filing. No theatrics. No build-up. "Your Honor," she said evenly, "I move to enter into evidence a notarized designation of standby guardianship executed by the deceased mother, Vanessa Marie Wood, 3 weeks prior to her death." The room shifted. Craig leaned forward. Sloane's expression tightened and then slipped. Grace read the document aloud. The naming clause. The exclusions. Lorraine excluded, with reasons. Dean and Sloan excluded, with reasons. Then she reached the final line. "Whitney is the only member of my family who never stopped being kind, even when she didn't know the full story." She let it sit in the air. Then she continued. She entered the DNA results, the birth certificate, the visitation reports. Then she presented Exhibit E. Your Honor, Lorraine Wood received and signed this notification 7 weeks before any family member contacted my client. During that period, she did not inform her daughter that a biological niece existed and was in state custody. We asked the court to consider why. Judge Owens looked toward the gallery. Lorraine sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap. The stillness she always used when she wanted it mistaken for control. But I knew the difference, and I could see it beginning to fracture. Grace entered Exhibit D, the representative pay form, Sloane's signature, Dean's co-signature, a request to redirect a 5-year-old orphan survivor benefits into their joint account. Grace walked it through with the precision of a ledger audit. No emotion, only sequence. The respondents submitted this form 4 weeks after the child's mother died, she said. At that time, no guardian had been appointed and no court had granted authority over the child's finances. She paused. 2 payments were processed before the Social Security Administration suspended the arrangement. Craig objected. Overruled. Grace turned slightly toward the gallery. A family member told a caseworker in this courtroom that this child was never supposed to exist, she said. That same family knew she existed, knew she was alone, and chose not to inform the one person her mother trusted. A pause. While my client discovered she had a niece in a grocery store, the respondents were filing paperwork to access that child's financial benefits. Silence settled over the room. Lorraine stood. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait. She simply stood in the gallery and said, loud enough for the record, "This is what happens when you let people dig into things that should have stayed buried." "Ma'am," Judge Owens said immediately, "sit down." Lorraine didn't move. "I did what any mother would do," she insisted. "I protected my family from something that should never have." "Ma'am, sit down." Sloane was crying now. Dean stared at the table. Lorraine finally lowered herself back into the seat. But it was already too late, because the transcript had already captured everything. Grace asked if I had anything to add. I stood. I didn't grip the table. I didn't take a breath for emphasis. I simply stood the way I do in depositions, straight, steady, like the numbers I trust more than people. "Your Honor," I said, "I'm a forensic accountant. I run my own practice. I own my home. I have no debt. I'm stating this not because money is the point, but because money is exactly the point for the people sitting across from me." I looked at the judge. Vanessa's estate includes a house, a life insurance policy, and survivor benefits for Lily. I don't want any of it. I'm asking the court to create a protected trust for Lily, managed by an independent fiduciary, with every dollar reserved for her education, her healthcare, and her future. I paused. Not for effect, because what came next mattered more than anything I had ever said in a courtroom. The fiduciary manages distributions. I don't control the principal. I don't benefit from a single cent. The money belongs to her. Another pause. My sister raised her daughter alone for 5 years because our family told her that child was a disgrace. My sister is gone now, but she left a document saying she trusted me. She left a letter saying she loved me. And she left a little girl who walked into a grocery store and grabbed my hand because she recognized something in my face that her own grandmother tried to erase. I turned my eyes to Lorraine, then Dean, then Sloane, then back to the judge. She has a family now. It's me. I sat down. Grace rested a hand briefly on my arm. Across the table, Craig Phelps closed his binder. Judge Owens didn't take long. She reviewed the guardianship designation, the exclusions, the DNA results, the visitation reports, the representative pay form. Then she ruled. Temporary guardianship of Lily Wood was granted to Whitney Wood, effective immediately, with a review hearing scheduled in 6 months for permanent placement. The court also ordered an independent investigation into the unauthorized benefits application filed by Dean and Sloane Wood, and the court recommended that any proceeds from Vanessa's estate be placed into a protected trust consistent with my request, pending appointment of a fiduciary. Before adjourning, Judge Owens added one final line. The court notes that the deceased mother took deliberate, documented steps to designate a guardian for her child. The court gives significant weight to a parent's expressed wishes. This child was not forgotten. She was planned for. Sloane left first. She didn't look at Dean as she walked out, which said more about their marriage than anything in their filing ever could. Dean followed, hands in his pockets, shoulders low, the posture of someone who understood he had lost something larger than a case. Lorraine remained seated in the gallery long after the room began to empty. She looked at me once. I expected anger. Another speech. Another defense. Instead, she stood slowly, picked up her purse, adjusted her coat, and left through the side door without a word. No goodbye. No explanation. Nothing. I stepped into the hallway. Lily was sitting on a bench with Pam, swinging her legs, holding Plum by one ear. She saw me and slid down immediately. I knelt. She reached up and touched my face, the way children do when they are checking whether something real will stay real. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said. The months that followed were quieter than the ones before them, and that was the first time quiet felt like peace instead of tension. Lily moved into the second bedroom of my apartment. The room I had once used for filing and storage, which probably said everything about my life before she arrived. I bought a bed that didn't have a theme, because Lily didn't want a theme. She wanted a bed. She wanted a nightlight. She wanted strawberry milk in the fridge at all times, the small cartons with foil straws. I kept them on the bottom shelf where she could reach them herself. Dean repaid the survivor benefits that had been deposited into his account. His attorney arranged a repayment plan. The state opened a separate investigation into Sloane's application for potential benefits fraud. Their marriage, I heard through Grace, was collapsing under the weight of paperwork. Lorraine kept her distance. I didn't block her. I didn't erase her. I told Grace to inform her that she could see Lily under supervised conditions if she demonstrated consistent, respectful behavior over 6 months. "You can be her grandmother," I said, "if you can be a kind one. But you don't make decisions for her anymore. Not about her name. Not about her story. Not about whether she was supposed to exist." She hadn't responded. I wasn't waiting. Some reconciliations take years. Some never arrive. I was learning to live with both outcomes. One evening in November, 3 months after the hearing, I stood at the sink washing dishes while Lily colored at the kitchen table. The apartment smelled like overcooked pasta and strawberry milk she had spilled and tried, unsuccessfully, to clean herself. It was the kind of evening that would have bored me a year earlier. Now it was the best part of my day. Lily stood up and walked over holding Plum. She placed him gently on the counter beside the dish rack. "You can keep him now," she said. "I don't need him to be brave anymore." I turned off the water, dried my hands, and looked at the purple elephant. The stitched tag still read, Lily Wood. The same tag that had started everything in a grocery store on an ordinary Tuesday when a stranger tapped my shoulder and changed my life. "You sure?" I asked. She nodded. Then she looked up at me with my sister's eyes and said, "Can we go home now, Mommy?" She had said it once in a grocery store to a stranger. She had said it in her mother's letter. She had said it every night before sleep. And now she said it in her own kitchen. Her home. I looked at her and answered simply, "We're already home." She went back to her coloring. I placed Plum on the shelf above the stove, next to a framed photo of Vanessa I had hung after Lily moved in. Vanessa at 5, squinting in a sundress. Next to it, Lily's school photo from September. Same eyes. Same tilt of the head. Different story. I spent my life proving I didn't need anyone. A career built on order. An apartment built on silence. A reputation built on never asking. And then a 5-year-old taught me something I should have known all along. Family isn't who shares your blood quietly. It's who shows up loudly when it matters. That's my story. One stranger in a grocery aisle. One little girl who already knew where home was. And a truth I had to learn the hard way. A child is not a debt to be assigned. If this reminded you that family is who shows up, hold on to the people who showed up for you. Share it with someone who needs it. And I'll see you in the next one.